Perhaps no movie genre will serve and reward your ability to willingly suspend your disbelief more than horror. Because if you're a stickler for realism and consistent logic, you're gonna have a bad time with a lot of horror flicks. Many horror movies operate on a borderline dreamlike logic, where the storytelling machinations are just a means to an end, to move things along to the next gory set piece. And you know what? That's absolutely fine. If a scene is awesome enough, most audiences will forgive something that isn't logically watertight. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and here are 10 awesome horror movie moments that make no sense. Number 10. The Pool Party Massacre, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge has undergone something of a more positive critical re-evaluation in recent years, with many drawing attention to its intriguing homoerotic subtext. But you know what folks always loved? That delightfully unhinged scene when Freddy Krueger, while possessing protagonist Jesse, rocks up at a pool party in the real world and just starts slaying fools left and right. In addition to stabbing and slashing numerous hapless teens, Freddy heats up the swimming pool, causing those who fall in to be boiled alive, while leaving others to be burned to death and trampled by the panicking throngs. And the scene culminates with one of Freddy's most all-time badass lines, as he tells the survivors, "You are all my children now," before burning a hole through the fence and peacing out. As awesome as the scene is, it's nevertheless one of the most law-breaking moments in the entire Elm Street franchise, because the entire point of the original movie was that Freddy can only attack people in their dreams. Here, he's out in the open causing havoc, and even accepting the series' loosey-goosey approach to its own internal logic, it's completely devoid of sense. Number 9. Bob Gets Pinned to a Door, Halloween 1978. The original Halloween's death scenes are mostly pretty grounded, though that quite literally can't be said for the demise of Linda's poor boyfriend Bob. Bob not only gets stabbed in the chest by Michael Myers, but Mikey stabs him so damn hard he manages to impale him against a door, leaving him hanging there. It's a nasty, gut-wrenching scene which concludes with the unforgettably eerie visual of Michael staring at Bob's corpse and tilting his head with an almost childlike fascination. It's great, except for the fact that it makes no physical sense whatsoever. It's straight up impossible for even a moderately sized kitchen knife to pass through someone's body, penetrate a door, pin them to said door, and then hold up their entire body weight by itself. This is 100% a case where a kill was so conceptually cool that it was absolutely worth throwing basic science to the wind, even if some continue to nitpick it almost half a century later. Number 8. Pancakes, Cabin Fever. Love or hate Eli Roth's Cabin Fever, there's just no forgetting that scene. And by that scene, we're of course talking about pancakes. In the movie's third act, we're introduced to Dennis, the developmentally disabled young son of a local general store owner. A disease-infected Bert visits the store in search of help, but as the owner goes back inside to call a doctor, Dennis suddenly starts shouting pancakes and leaping around while performing karate moves. Dennis then bites Bert on the hand before Dennis's dad hilariously tries to turn the blame around on Bert. It's wild, and by far the most entertaining scene in the entire film. Depending on your perspective, that's either because or in spite of the fact it makes no damn sense at all. When a scene's this glorious though, it doesn't really need to make sense. But seriously though, why pancakes? Fun fact, according to Roth, all the random karate moves were added in the scene last minute when he saw actor Matthew Helms performing them on a break during filming. Number 7. Tatum Gets Stuck in the Cat Flap, Scream. Tatum Riley's death in the original Scream remains one of the series' most iconic. After being attacked by Ghostface in Stu's garage, Tatum knocks the killer down and attempts to flee through the garage's cat flap, only to find herself unable to squeeze through. As she's stuck in the cat flap, Ghostface then raises the garage door, crushing her to death. It's a great scene, albeit one whose blatant artifice has been joked about ever since release. As Tatum struggles while caught in the cat flap, it's incredibly clear that actress Rose McGowan could definitely fit her slender frame through it. Even though director Wes Craven edits the scene to try and conceal this fact, it's hilariously obvious. As it turns out, this was actually something of an on-set problem that the crew only discovered once filming began. McGowan kept slipping through the cat flap, and so they had to staple her t-shirt to the flap to combat this. It doesn't really paper over how little sense Tatum's death makes, but it's still an all-timer horror death scene all the same. Number 6. McCulloch gets toxic wasted, Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. It's no secret that the Friday the 13th franchise basically got more cartoonishly ridiculous with each subsequent sequel, and this extended to Jason Voorhees' outrageous ability to basically teleport between locations in order to catch his victims by surprise. And this reached a self-parodying peak in one of the best scenes from the generally awful Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Late in the movie, pompous windbag biology teacher Charles McCulloch runs away from Jason and seeks refuge in a building, only to be near instantly defenestrated from the top window by Jason, who has somehow beaten him to the building. And though we see Jason staring at McCulloch from the top window afterwards, no more than 4 seconds later, Jason has made it outside and stands by a fallen McCulloch. And to top it off, he then dunks him headfirst into a vat of toxic waste, which just so happens to be laying around the New York City streets. It's a suitably brutal kill for a real a-hole, even if the filmmakers don't even try to conceal how absurdly quickly Jason is able to move around. It's far from the movie's biggest problem, but it is total nonsense. Number 5. Everything about the amusement park, Zombieland. Zombieland's epic finale sees Tallahassee, Columbus, Wichita, and Little Rock head to the Pacific Playland amusement park, which they believe to be entirely free of zombies. Except activating the park's rides ends up attracting a massive undead horde, prompting the heroic quartet to fight back in a gloriously gory set piece. Where else can you see Woody Harrelson shoot zombies while riding a roller coaster, or Jesse Eisenberg bash a zombie clown's head in with a sledgehammer? The scene's a blast, but it also requires audiences to employ some major suspension of disbelief. Even accepting that the gang genuinely thought the area was zombie-free and that Wichita was desperate to show her younger sister Little Rock a fun time, it's extremely tough to believe that they'd be careless enough to light up the entire park like a damn beacon. Between the lights and sound, they basically rang the dinner bell for the zombies, and it was a miracle they all made it out of the situation in one piece. If you can forgive that major gap in logic though, it's a dope scene. Number 4. Emily's death in a public place, The Invisible Man. Lee Whannell's The Invisible Man is for the most part an incredibly tight and relatively realistic take on its formidable IP. Its single most shocking scene occurs when protagonist Cecilia meets up at a restaurant with her sister Emily to explain that her abusive ex, Adrian, has used his optical suit to fake his own death. But soon enough, his invisible figure appears at the restaurant, slits Emily's throat, and thrusts the knife into Cecilia's hand, effectively framing her for murder. In terms of execution, if you pardon the pun, it's a terrifically directed scene which mines Emily's brutal demise for maximum shock value, even if it does strain the film's logical integrity to near snapping point. Even if you can forgive the slightly clunky manner with which the knife ends up in Cecilia's hands post-murder, most upmarket restaurants in major cities would certainly have security cameras covering the main dining area. While you can argue that the authorities would be unlikely to humour Cecilia's request to view the footage, it's pretty routine for the police to check surveillance cameras when a major crime has taken place. And so if they did that, as they absolutely would, they'd see that the knife was propelled through the air and killed Emily without Cecilia's involvement at all. Add to this the considerable likelihood that someone in the restaurant would have accidentally captured video of the incident, and the whole framed for murder shtick becomes decidedly less convincing. But ultimately, the scene's brutality and what it's trying to achieve is great enough that it's easy to overlook how little sense it makes in a modern world where we're rarely more than a few feet away from a recording camera. Number 3. Impaled by a Bike, Prince of Darkness. John Carpenter strikes again, this time with his 1987 cult classic, Prince of Darkness. The supernatural horror memorably features a cameo from rock legend Alice Cooper, who plays the pale-faced leader of a mob of unhinged homeless people and is credited as Street Schizo. Cooper gets his moment to shine when he and his mob attack quantum physicist student Etchinson as he leaves the monastery containing what's effectively liquid Satan. As Etchinson tries to walk through the adjoining alley, Cooper's character picks up half a bicycle which is randomly laying in the alley, unsteadily walks towards Etchinson, and then straight up stabs him with it. It's a gnarly kill and a fun cameo for Cooper, even if the physical mechanics of impaling someone with a bicycle are tough to make sense of. After all, we get a clear look at the metal bar driven through Etchinson, and it isn't sharp, like at all. The force needed to drive that blunt object through the guy is basically impossible for any mere mortal. Then again, it is Alice Cooper we're talking about, so Number 2. The Disappearing Bodies, Resident Evil. Sometimes fan service is worth it, even when it's straight up nonsense. Case in point, midway through Paul W.S. Anderson's original Resident Evil film, the heroes return to the infamous laser hallway where their comrades were diced up a little while earlier, and Kaplan notes that all of their dead teammates' bodies have strangely vanished. Hell, there's not even a single drop of blood visible on the hallway's ground, suggesting that somebody or something inexplicably cleaned it. In actual fact, this was a nod to longtime fans of the video game series, who will be familiar with the fact that when a zombie is killed in-game, their body will disappear if you return to the room later for any reason. For the games, this was clearly done for technical reasons, but for the movie, it's merely an amusing in-joke for gamers, even if there's no easy way to explain how all those meaty chunks of dead soldier just upped and vanished. Number 1. Death Hides the Evidence, Final Destination. The death of Alex's best pal, Todd, in the original Final Destination remains one of the series' most memorable and brilliantly wince-inducing. Todd is the first survivor of Flight 180 to be claimed by death when he's implausibly garroted after slipping on some water in the bathroom and falling onto an ill-placed clothesline. This death scene effectively crystallized the series' penchant for devious fake-outs, as after showing numerous instruments which could kill Todd, namely a sharp razor and a pair of scissors, it's the damn water clothesline combo that gets him. As flippantly, comedically brutal as many of the series' deaths tend to be, this one is still genuinely nasty and uncomfortable to watch today. Seeing Todd so desperately attempting to free himself from strangulation while being a likable character to boot makes this prolonged death scene sheer agony to sit through. But it's also a little out of step with the franchise's general approach to death itself, as we unambiguously see death attempting to cover up its involvement by forcing the leaking water to recede back into the toilet, in turn causing Todd's death to be labelled a suicide. The idea of death having such an overt, tangible impact on the physical world was dropped for all the sequels, and so it sticks out like a sore thumb here, like a concept from an earlier draft that somehow made its way into the final script.